Railroads were beginning to crisscross North America, moving all sorts of goods, people, and animals from sellers to buyers. Railroads were essential to business, and they worked great on land. However, rivers were sometimes in the way of commerce. Such was the case between Point Edward, Ontario, and Port Huron, Michigan. For many years, the problem was solved with a variety of barges that could transport the rail cars across the St. Clair River. In Point Edward, the terminal was kept busy with freight and passengers. When livestock arrived, they often had to be unloaded from the rail cars and kept in pens to be fed and watered until it was time to be reloaded and put on the rail barge. This whole procedure took a lot of time and slowed down the rail traffic even more. The Port Huron side was just as busy. After much study, the solution seemed to be a tunnel under the river. Sites were chosen at the south end of both Sarnia and Port Huron, and preparations were made. Alfred Beach had designed a machine that could both protect the work and workers as well as facilitate installing the lining of the tunnel. There was also room to install a small track to haul out the debris. Here we see the size of the two shields used in the first St. Clair Tunnel. One of these started from each side of the river, pushing toward the center. To launch these machines, a backstop had to be built behind each shield. The yellow arrow shows the backstop, and the red arrow shows the cutting face. At the top of the scaffolding here, we see men tightening the bolts of the cast iron lining pieces of the tunnel lining. The 1-ton pieces each had 56 bolts to hold them to the rings of segments behind them. The yellow arrow shows the crane that lifted the segments into place. The red arrow shows the horse and cart that was used to haul out the debris the other workers dug from the front of the shield. This yellow arrow shows the rams that push the shield ahead the 1.5 feet to allow the next ring of segments to fit into place. The red arrow shows the crane loaded with a segment. The blue arrow in the cutaway part shows the men at the front of the shield. They are digging by hand a hole 20 feet across and over a mile long. As anyone can see, this was a very labor-intensive job. The men who worked it earned $1 a day. Horses were used from the first part of the work until the hole started to go under the river. Then the whole tunnel was put under air pressure. The horses couldn't take going through the airlock with the change of pressure, and they began to die. So the decision was made to use donkeys who were better able to stand the air pressure. The use of air pressure helped to stabilize the front of the works too, and there were not so many of the slide-ins where the clay became liquid and rolled into the shield, endangering the men digging at the front of the shield. Working constantly from July 1889 to August of 1990, the hole, 20 feet around and a mile long, had been dug. When the figures showed that the two shields were close, the men drilled a small hole through and exchanged a plug of tobacco, the first freight through the new tunnel. The final shoves of the shield put them together within 1/8 of an inch. Pretty amazing calculating. Steam engines were built special to pull the trains through the tunnel. They were able to run both frontwards and backwards, and they were strong enough to pull the freight up the slopes at each side of the river. These new engines were decorated to be part of the celebrations at the opening of the new tunnel. Steam trains produced a lot of smoke, which was sucked out of the tunnel as fast as possible by huge fans. Even with these huge fans, the air in the tunnel was toxic if the railmen were in it very long. An unfortunate number of men lost their lives because of the smoke. In 1808, the tracks and tunnel were electrified, getting rid of the smoke problem. Those electric engines were also replaced in the 1950s with diesel engines, and the electric works were removed. The diesel engines handled all of the tunnel traffic until its 100th anniversary in 1990. 3 months after turning 100, the announcement was made that the tunnel would be replaced by a 30-foot diameter one. Excalibur was the name of the new tunnel boring machine. It did the same work as the original shields with fewer men and not so much physical labor. Instead of men digging at the front, claws on the new head dug into the clay, and instead of horses and donkeys, a conveyor system handled the debris. The new tunnel is lined with concrete pieces bolted together instead of the cast iron pieces of the old one. And in 1991, there was only one boring machine, which started November of 1993 and came out in Port Huron in November of 1994. The new tunnel is able to handle the double-stacked cans that can go on ships, trucks, and trains crisscrossing the country. The taller rail cars that have automobiles can also go into the new tunnel instead of being taken out of the trains and sent by barge across the river, as had been happening for a number of years. Approximately 1 train per hour uses the tunnel in 2017, and they don't have to stop and switch engines anymore. The current engines are able to handle the grade on both sides of the St. Clair River, keeping freight moving.